Welcome to the New Process Podcast. Learn all the tools, methods, and best practices combined with people, emotions, and a human-centric mindset to rethink your process and push it to the next level. And here is your host, Mirko Kloppenberg.
Yeah, welcome to episode 68 of the New Process Podcast. It's great to have you here. You may have noticed that it's been around 6 months since I've published the last episode, and that's not because I stopped thinking about process management. Actually, quite the opposite. Over the last month, I've been working intensely on further developing new process. I've done a lot of work on process strategy and helping organizations to become truly process-driven. And I also explored new ideas around process experience and continued to work on the tool question. Today, I'm back at Zehlendorfer Strand, taking the time to reflect on where we are with new process right now. During the last few weeks, at some point, I realized that new process somehow has evolved. Not because I had decided to change it overnight, but because all these different ideas, experiences, and discussions slowly started to come together. And that's exactly why today's episode is special. It is not another episode about process modeling or process ownership or AI or process architecture. Instead, I'd like to take a step back and answer a much bigger question today. Where does new process actually stand in 2026? So asking the question, what I've learned over the last years, which ideas have become more important, which assumptions have changed, and why do I believe that process management needs a new chapter, especially in the age of artificial intelligence. So if you've been following the podcast for a while, I hope this episode helps you connect many of the ideas we've explored over the years. And if you're new to new process, I honestly think there's no better place to start. So thank you for being here. Lean back, enjoy the episode, and let's explore where new process stands today.
And now, let's start to rethink processes.
Let me start with something I saw a lot during the last years. A company decides it finally wants to get serious about processes, so they buy a BPM tool, a good one for sure. They spend months modeling boxes, arrows, swim lanes, the whole thing. And then they sit back, look what they've built, and quietly ask themselves, okay, what now? I've watched that moment happen for more than 20 years now, in huge corporations and in tiny teams. And here's the uncomfortable part. It's happening right now again. Except this time it's not the BPM tool. It is AI. Same energy, same rush. Let's automate. Let's put AI on our processes. And the same blind spot underneath it. We are trying to speed something up that we've never really understood in the first place. So the question I keep coming back to, the question this whole episode is about, is not what happened since the last State of New Process episode. It's simpler and it's bigger. Where does new process stand today? That's it. That's the whole episode. Where are we really with this idea? After all the conversations, all the podcast episodes, all the work with organizations trying to make processes actually work for the people inside them. New process somehow has changed. It's grown up. It started as a way of thinking about processes. Then it became a framework. And today it's something more than that. And I want to walk you through exactly what. So here's my promise for the next 40 minutes or so. I'm not going to sell you anything. I'm going to talk about ideas. Where this comes from, what it became, and where it is going to. Especially now in the middle of the AI noise. And if there is one line I want to carry through the whole episode, it's this one, No AI without process, no process without purpose. I posted this already several times on LinkedIn, and Now hold on to that. I'll come back to it more than once for sure. But before we talk about roles or AI or the future, we have to talk about something much more basic. Something almost everyone skips. So what actually is a process? Let's do a short reflection. Why new process? Before we go further, there is one question I get surprisingly often. Why is it called new process? Not because processes are new, not because everything I've learned about BPM is suddenly wrong, definitely not. It's called new process because I believe we need a new way of thinking about processes. A way that starts with purpose instead of models. A way that ends with improvement instead of documentation. A way that recognizes that people don't simply work in processes, they bring processes to life. A new process is a new way of thinking. Changing the way we think about processes changes the way we design organizations and we design processes. And that's why I still call it new process. So let's talk about the core, what new process actually is. And let me answer that question the way I've come to see it. A process is not first a model. It's not a tool. It's not an automation pipeline. A process is the way people work together to create something of value. That sounds almost too simple, right? But stay with me, because everything changes once you take it seriously. So if a process is really about people working together, then documenting isn't enough. Standardizing isn't enough. Automating or AIing it definitely isn't enough. Because you can have the cleanest model in the world and the people who actually live it don't get the point of it. If they don't feel involved or just experience it as a burden, then you don't have a process-driven organization. You have very expensive drawing. This is the heart of new process. It's the connection of the two worlds that usually don't sit at the same table. On the one side, solid, proven business process management, structure, roles, metrics, governance, the discipline. I love that world. I grew up in it. On the other side, a human-centric attitude. The kind we know from new work, from new ways of working, meaning, trust, participation. And the sentence I keep coming back to, that one that captures the whole thing for me is this. BPM gives you structure. New process gives that structure meaning, energy, and acceptance. Structure alone doesn't move people, and meaning alone doesn't scale. So you need both. Now, I want to be careful here, because this is where people often misunderstand me. When I say human-centric, some people hear, oh, that's soft. They hear, oh, we are dropping the governance, we are dropping the discipline. We're just going to be nice to everybody. And actually, that's not right. It's the opposite. Human-centric does not mean less rigor. In some ways, it means even more. The roles still have to be clear. The responsibilities still have to be assigned. The steering still has to happen. Human-centric isn't a soft add-on you sprinkle on top after all the real work is done. It's the attitude you start with. It's there from the first line you draw. There's a phrase we use, first human, then digital, and I need you to hear it correctly. It's not a timeline. It's not saying spend the first few years on feelings before you touch any technology. It's a logic of effect. It's about what has to be true for the technology to actually help. Get the human part right, and then the digital part multiplies it. So get the human part wrong, and the digital part multiplies that too. Because that's the one thing about technology, and we'll go deeper onto this later. Technology doesn't replace process work, it amplifies it. Good process work and bad process work, both. So it's a magnifier. Let me make this concrete, because I don't want you to think this is philosophy. This way of working, it's not a theory I dreamed up at a desk. It's been used in, for example, fertilizer companies. Yeah. Greetings go out. In aviation, in hospitals, in insurances, in automotive, in publishing, in organizations of 35 people and organizations of 100,000 people. Different industries, wildly different sizes, but same underlying idea, and it holds. And I learned this the hard way. For a big part of my career, I was working at the Lufthansa Group. Most of you know this. And those years really shaped me more than almost anything else in my work life. That's where I learned what professional process management really means. Not from the textbook. Actually, when I studied business information systems, there hasn't been a process management lecture at all. I learned this the hard way in the daily work on huge, complex, international processes. I saw how process actually lives, how many people are involved, how different two locations, north and south of Frankfurt Airport, for example, can be for the very same process. And I'm grateful for these years. They somehow laid the foundation for everything that came after. But across all those years, and I mean everywhere, not just in a single place or for a single process, I kept bumping into the same quite failure. Process documented with enormous care, and still, in most of the cases, they didn't really land in the people's day-to-day work. There are exceptions, You might remember the episodes with Christoph Bünker or Lars Müller, but in so many processes, so much energy poured into models that, in the end, almost nobody opened. And it wasn't because the methods were bad, not at all. The methods were good. Something else was missing. The people who worked in and on those processes were too rarely generally part of building them. And that's the moment New Process was really born for me. Not as a rejection of everything I'd learned, actually the opposite, as the next logical step. I didn't throw away what worked. I just kept asking, why does all this good, careful work so often fail to reach the people it's for? So that's where we start. Not with a diagram, We start with a conviction. Processes are social systems. People accept a process when they experience meaning, when they are involved, when they know where they stand. And here's the thing. If processes are social, then process work needs two things in order. First an attitude and then a system. So let's talk about both. The attitude and the system. Principles and framework. Before we dive into the framework itself, let me share one personal observation. My own understanding of process management has changed more over the last few years than during the 2 decades before. I still love structure. I still love governance and architecture. I love talking about architecture. But today, what really excites me most is seeing people discover the purpose behind their work. Watching a process owner become a real leader. Watching teams improve a process because they truly care about it. That's when process management becomes alive, and it's so fascinating to see this. And that's what keeps me passionate about New Process. So, where does the attitude live? It lives in what we call the New Process principles. There are 8 of them, and I want to be really precise about what they are, because people love to turn principles into a poster, maybe with ChatGPT, a poster on the wall that nobody reads. So the principles are not a method. They are not a 9th tool next to the other tools. They are the mindset you bring to everything else. they are the reason New Process looks at processes differently. I won't march you through all the 8, like a shopping list. That would be exactly the kind of thing I'm trying to get us away from. But let me give you the spirit of them. Yeah? Trust the people who work in and on the process. Involve them in the work on the process, not at the end, right from the start. You know? Inspire people. Help them to grow. Design collaboration around what humans actually need. And the one I'd put right at the center, give a process a purpose. Purpose, yeah. Let me stay there for a second, because for me, it's the secret weapon. And most people treat the purpose of a process as soft, fluffy add-on, yeah. A nice sentence you write once and then forget. I see it completely different, and I've done it completely different. Purpose is a steering anchor, which gives direction. Yeah? It's the thing that tells you how to decide when no model exists. Should this step exist? Should we automate this? Should we make an exception here? You can't answer any of that without knowing what the process is actually for. And there's a simple way I separate 2 words that get tangled up all the time. Purpose and strategy. Purpose gives direction and meaning. Strategy describes the path to get there. So purpose is the what for. Wofür machen wir das? And strategy is the how do we get from where we are to where we want to go to. So 2 different questions that don't blur them. Okay, so the principles are the attitude. Yeah? But an attitude on its own doesn't build an organization. You can be the most human-centric leader in the world and still have chaos. Yeah? So you need to translate this attitude into something you can actually run. And that's the New Process BPM framework. Yeah, the picture I use for it, the one that seems to click for people, is this. The framework is the operating system for a process-driven organization. It's what makes sure that purpose, roles, communication, steering, architecture, modeling, and improvement don't happen by accident. They work together on purpose. The framework has 4 parts, and they are not a menu where you can pick your favorites. They connect. The first is the New Process lifecycle. 7 phases, from defining the purpose all the way through continuous improvement. I often call it the process of process management. Der PDPM, Prozess des Prozessmanagements. Because that's really what it is. Managing a process is itself a repeatable process which should be managed. It's the mother of all processes. The second is the New Process role concept. And here's the single most important distinction in the whole framework. So let me slow down. There are 2 kinds of responsibility that people constantly confuse. I recorded several videos and LinkedIn posts on this. Yeah. On the one hand side, there is design responsibility. Who owns how the process should work? That's the process owner. And on the other side, there is the execution responsibility. Who makes sure the process actually gets carried out in a given unit? That's the line manager. Now, one person can hold both roles at once. That's totally fine. But even then, the 2 responsibilities stay separate in your head. The moment you blur them, you get the classical mistake. You make the process owner accountable for execution. And suddenly nobody knows who actually is responsible for what. So the process owner is never accountable for the execution of a process, only for the design. Let me make that real for a second, because it sounds abstract sometimes. Picture a recruiting process that runs at several locations. And the design of the process, how recruiting should work, is defined once, centrally. But the actual hiring happens locally, in each place, with its own people and its own characteristics. That's what we call an instance, a process instance. The same process living in different execution contexts. And that's exactly why you need process managers on the ground to coordinate the execution in their respective instance and carry the local reality back into how the process evolves. One design, many lives. If you don't separate those two things cleanly, you either crush the local reality or you lose the shared standard. You want both. The third part is the new process communication and steering model. 5 communication flows. And the whole point of them is almost aggressively practical. Decisions should get made at the right level, in the right format. Instead of everything turns into an escalation to whoever shouts loudest. I saw that more than once. I really experienced that more than once. When you have real communication flows in place, you don't need drama. The strategy conversations happens where strategy belongs, on senior management level. The day-to-day coordination happens where it belongs. And then these levels connect through the communication flows, or lately we also called it steering formats. Let me give you the rhythm of it, because this is where it stops being a diagram and starts being a heartbeat. You can really use these communication and steering formats as a heartbeat. In practice, you have a cadence. Every few weeks, the people coordinating the process sit together and see how it actually is running. Where are the improvement ideas? Who needs training? Where are people stuck? And then a bit less often, for example, on a monthly beat, the conversation lift more and more towards strategy. Are we still on the path we agreed on? And once a quarter, maybe, it goes up to the top where the big company-wide decisions actually get made. So weekly, monthly, quarterly. Each level has its format. You have to define it specifically for your process, for your organization. Each decision has its home. That's so important with regards to this communication and steering model. Nothing has to explode into a crisis to get attention. That's what steering actually feels like when it works. Quiet, rhythmic, boring in the best possible way. And I realized this myself during last year, how powerful this is if you have specific steering formats in place on management level and also on operational level, and somehow connecting these different levels, putting the topics where they should be visible, also give visibility to the people. That's super cool, and it's so important to bring process to life. And the fourth part of the framework is the new process notation. The language we draw processes in. I'll be honest with you, I'm not a fan, and most of you know this, I'm not a fan of forcing everyone to read complex BPMN 2.0. It has its place, for sure. If you're going to technically automate something or analyze it in fine detail, fine, just use it. But for building a shared understanding, for getting a whole organization to actually see and use its processes, it's too much. New process uses deliberately simple language, simple enough that someone who has never taken a process course can look at the model and get it. And if you later need a technical depth, you can translate it into BPMN 2.0, but you don't start there. And one more thing, and then I'll let this breathe. From time to time, people ask me, Mirko, what's your maturity model that you're using? How do we know how far along we are? I keep it deliberately lean, just 4 steps. Implicit, the process lives only in the people's heads. Documented, it's written down. Steered, it's actually being managed. And finally improved. It's getting better over time. And that's it. I'm just using these for maturity level. And maybe you notice what's not on that list. Automation is not the top step anymore. Automation isn't the crone at the end of the maturity ladder. It's just one possible shape a steered, improved process might take. Which actually is the perfect place to turn to the topic everyone wants to talk about. Because if purpose gives direction and meaning, what happens when the entire industry gets obsessed with a technology that has no idea what anything is for? Let's talk about AI. No AI without process. Here's what I find fascinating about almost every AI conversation in our field right now. They all start in the same place. Which AI tool, which model, which agent platform, what's our automation rate? The technology comes first and everything else is supposed to follow. New process turns that around completely. We don't start with the tool. We start with the process, its purpose, and the people who carry it. And then, only then, AI shows up as one possible way to strengthen that. One amplifier among severals. Not a category of its own, not the main character. Now, let me be clear. Because people try to put me in a box on this, I'm not against AI. Not even a little. My position is split on purpose. And I think the split is the whole point. And by the way, when I say AI, I don't mean one thing. There's classic analytical AI, the kind that finds patterns in data. There's generative AI, the kind that writes and drafts and summarizes. And there is plain automation, which often isn't AI at all. You don't need a deep technical breakdown, but you do need to stop treating AI as one magic word. Different tools, different jobs. AI for analysis? Yeah, absolutely. Let it read the data, spot the patterns, summarize the feedback, help the process owner make sense of their own process. AI to support the people in the roles? Yes. Let it prepare the training material, draft the communication, interpret the numbers, flag the inconsistencies. On that side, I'm a big fan of using AI. Think about the everyday reality of a process owner. They are drowning in feedback from 3 locations. A stack of metrics they don't have time to read. A model somebody needs explained in a plain language for training. That's exactly the kind of work where a generative AI assistant is a gift. Cluster the feedback, interpret the numbers, explain the model. Actually, I'm a fan of models which are self-explaining. We don't need AI, but if we're talking about more complex BPMN 2.0 models, then use Gen AI to explain the model. Draft the stakeholder message for 2 different audiences. It doesn't. So the AI, it doesn't decide anything. It clears the fog so human can decide better. I use it like that myself constantly. But AI to fully generate and model your process for you, there I stop. And it's not because I think the AI can't produce a decent looking model. It probably can, and I saw a lot of these. It's because of something I've watched happen for as long as I've been doing this work. When people don't take part in shaping a process, they don't own it. It never becomes theirs. It never becomes their baby. And a process that isn't anybody's baby is a process nobody defends, Nobody improves, nobody really runs. It just sits there, technically correct and practically dead. That's the co-creation line. Yeah? AI can support the work. It cannot replace the participation that makes the work stick. So let me give you one more principle I hold on this, because it surprises people. Yeah? When something can be automated with clear deterministic rules, plain old-fashioned rule-based automation, I usually prefer that over AI. Why? Because AI always carries a risk of being wrong. It's probabilistic by nature. So AI earns its place where the deterministic approach runs out, where you need interpretation, where you are supporting knowledge work, where rigid rules would break. AI doesn't replace classic automation. Yeah, that's so important. It extends it into the messy territory where rules alone can't go. And here is the part that I really think matters, the part that cuts against the hype. Everybody assumes AI makes governance less important. Yeah, the machine handles it now. Relax. I believe the exact opposite. Yeah. The more AI reaches into our processes, the more you need roles, you need your governance, your steering formats matter, not less. Think about the question that subtly gets sharper. Who decides whether an AI recommendation actually gets implemented? Who is accountable for an automated result? Who checks whether a rule is even still valid? And the one that keeps me up, who stops an automation when it starts producing the wrong thing? If you can't answer those, you don't have an AI strategy, you have an AI liability, I would say. And notice, every one of those questions is a role question. Who decides? Who is accountable? Who checks? Who stops? That's not a new work invention for the AI era. That's the role concept we already talked about, suddenly under a more brighter spotlight. This is why I keep saying the framework doesn't get replaced by AI. It gets needed more and more by AI. And there's also a quieter risk I want to name, because it doesn't show up on a dashboard. When people start just following the tool's output, when the AI says, do this, and everyone does it without understanding why, you slowly lose the process knowledge itself. The organization gets faster and dumber at the same time. That's the thing I actually worry about. Not robots taking over, people switching off their brains because of the interface looks confident and nice. And I also say one careful thing about the legal side, and then move on, because I'm not a lawyer and I wouldn't pretend to be. So the rules around AI are moving toward a risk-based logic. The more a system influences decisions that affect people, the more transparency and human oversight it demands. That's good. That's not a burden that fights against process management. That is process management. Clear responsibility, clear oversight, clear formats. The stronger the AI, the more you need exactly the things new process was already about. And one quick correction, because it comes up constantly and somehow it fits here. People lump process mining into the AI and automation bucket. I don't. Process mining is an analysis method. It shows you exactly what is happening in your process. It's incredibly powerful and useful, but it lives inside the steering and improvement and strategy, not inside the automation conversation. And it answers a very specific question. Process mining shows you what happens. Purpose explains what it should happen for. Two different questions. Don't let the first one make you forget the second one. So that's about process mining here. So where does this leave us? AI is an amplifier, a powerful one, which is exactly why I say it the way I do. No AI without process, and no process without purpose. Yeah? Get that order wrong and you don't get the transformation. You just get expensive noise. And the only real question left is the one nobody in the hype cycle is asking here. What exactly are we amplifying? So let me show you the answer. The answer I've fallen in love with. And I would call it process experience. Yeah? Process you can feel. For most of the history of this field, we have measured processes from the outside. Yeah? How long does it take? What does it cost? How many errors? Throughput, cycle time, quality, all important, all real. And I'm not throwing any of that away. But let me ask you something. When was the last time anyone measured how a process feels to the people who run it every single day? Yeah? Not whether it's fast, whether it gives them energy or drains it. Yeah? That's the idea I can't let go of. And it has a name in what we are building. We call it the energy meter. The energy meter is simple to describe and I think kind of profound once it sinks in. Yeah? Alongside the classic number, energy meter captures how a process feels for the human inside it. Is this activity energizing? Is it more neutral? Is it draining, confusing, frustrating, motivating? You make that visible, right on the process model, so the people responsible can actually see where human energy is leaking out of the system. And this idea actually came out of a podcast conversation, episode 59 with Professor Eugen Bogodistov about how good process management can actually help to prevent burnout. His idea was that the energy level of the people in a process is a resource, a real one. And you should design work so it gives energy instead of stealing it. And that conversation now turned into a concept, which is, by the way, exactly how this whole thing is supposed to work. But more on that in a minute. Now, let's step back and see what this really is. Because the energy meter is just one expression of a much bigger idea. And the bigger idea is this. Processes shouldn't only be documented, they should be experienced. I call it process experience. And once you see it, you will see it everywhere. It's the difference between a process that lives in a binder nobody opens and a process people can find, understand, feel, discuss and improve because they can actually engage with it. I've seen this literally physically in a room. When I was in Linz with the Makers Lab team, we built a walkthrough process landscape. Maybe you remember this. I also published a video on this about a year ago. A recruiting process you could literally walk through step by step, with objects, with emotions, with the whole thing laid out in space on the attic of the Tabakfabrik Linz. People didn't read that process, they walked it. You could walk through the process, you could stay inside the moment where a candidate waits 2 weeks for an answer and feels forgotten. And you could experience this hurdle of getting a no or a yes in the application. You can talk about how a process step feels, not just what it did or what it does. And I promise you, you would understand that process in a way no diagram on the slide has ever achieved. So that's process experience made physical, and it completely changed how I think a tool should work. Because here's the quiet standard I hold any human-centric tool to. It's not about how many notation symbols it offers. It's not how cool the BPMN 2.0 editor is. It's the opposite. Can everyone in the organization actually find their processes? Can they understand a model without a training course? Can they see who's responsible and see the purpose of the process, not just its steps? And can they give feedback right there and feel heard by the owner, for example? A tool that adds complexity really fails this task, and a tool that gives orientation, that would pass it. So that's the whole bar, orientation over complexity. And there's also a thing we called the pizza game. Yeah, it all goes the way back to my time at Lufthansa, where first vision of this game came together with Ole Tillmann and some colleagues. And the whole point of it is the same. Yeah, make process orientation something you feel, not something you are lectured about. And the claim underneath the whole thing is the 3 words, experience your process. Because if we really want process to be human-centric, we can't only ask how fast they run. We have to understand how much energy they give the people inside them, or how much energy they take away. So, which raises the last question: if a single process can be experienced like that, what does that mean for a whole organization, for a whole movement? So let's talk about the vision where New Process is going to. Let me tell you what New Process actually is today, structurally. Not because this is the part that's changed the most, and it's been the part I'm most excited about. Today, New Process is a knowledge platform, And the New Process BPM framework published last year was the first big output of that platform, not its origin. The framework isn't even the main thing I work on anymore. The main thing is the knowledge itself. And here's the principle behind it. Knowledge first, publishing second. There is one structured, living, growing body of knowledge. The principles, the framework, the roadmap, the examples, the stories, and everything else is a projection of that. So the framework, the free roadmap course, the podcast you're listening to right now, the newsletter, the workshops, maybe a future book, the tool, all of it pulls from the same, so that no matter where someone meets New Process, they meet the same thing. And I picture it as a journey. Somebody discovers the idea on LinkedIn or on this podcast. They go deeper with New Process Guide, the course, the framework, and eventually they're actually doing it, building the roadmap, running the roles, maybe using a tool. Every format catches people at the different point of their path. The knowledge base makes sure we are all walking the same road. And everything I'm creating, I decided to build it that way. I'm asking everyone else to build their processes. Now, here's the part I love most. The journey runs in both directions. The outputs are also inputs. Remember the energy meter that didn't come down from me at Seelendorfer Strand? It came from a podcast conversation. So an output that became a source. Every good interview, every workshop, every real experience with a company feeds new learning back into the base. So it's not a broadcast, it's a loop. And where is that loop heading? Let me say it as plainly as I can, because this is the standing answer to the whole question of this episode. Processes will no longer only be documented, they will be experienced. So the long-term vision has a name in my head, a process experience platform, and not a product I'm announcing. It's a direction in an environment that helps people live their processes together, find them, understand them, feel them, discuss them, improve them. And in that vision, AI has a role, but notice, AI is the enabler. It's not the destination. The destination is human, as it always was. And that's the shift, really. Yeah, we didn't end up at new process as a framework. We end up at new process as a way of experiencing work together. So the framework is how we get the structure right. The experience is what it's all for.
Let's recap today's new process inspiration.
So maybe that sounded a bit spiritual. So let me pull the whole thing together. Where does new process stand today? And here's the honest answer in 5 movements. 1, we start from a conviction. Processes are social systems, not diagrams. People creating value together. 2, that conviction becomes real through an attitude and a system. 8 principles for the mindset and a 4-part framework, the operating system for a process-driven organization. 3, when AI shows up, we don't lose our heads. We put it in its place, a powerful amplifier. Welcome for analysis and support, but never a replacement for the human participation that makes a process someone's own, someone's baby. And in the age of AI, roles and governance get more important, not less. 4, we stop measuring processes only from the outside. We start caring how they feel, because a process that drains people is actually a broken process, no matter how fast it runs. 5, and we are grown from a framework into a platform, a living body of knowledge with one direction, processes you don't just document, but experience. And holding all 5 together, one line: no AI without process, no process without purpose. That's where we stand. So, what does that mean for you? I want to end where I started, with that quiet moment. The one where someone has bought the BPM tool, drawn all boxes, and is sitting there thinking, now what? Here's what 25 years have taught me. The now what is never answered by a better tool, or a smarter model, or a faster automation. It's answered by going back to something almost embarrassingly simple. Why does this process exist? Who works in it? Do they get it? Do they trust it? Did we build it with them or just handed it out to them? So it's not nostalgia. It's the opposite. I think it's the most future-proof thing you can do, because the more powerful the technology gets, the easier it becomes to automate the wrong thing beautifully. And the one protection against it, the only one I found so far, is to keep the people in the process in view, to keep asking what it's for. That's what new process is. Today, it's an attitude, a system, and a vision all at once. And I'm more convinced than ever that in the age of AI, it doesn't get less relevant, it gets more. Because in the end, a process is just people working together, trying to create something good. Let's not automate that away. Let's bring it to life. So here's one thing I'll ask you for, and it's not to buy anything. If any of this resonates, don't try to transform your whole organization on Monday morning. Start with one process, just one. And before you automate it, before you optimize it, before you touch a single tool, ask it the simple question: what is this actually for? Give it a purpose. Bring the people who live in it in the room and answer this question together. And if you want a structured way to take the next step, I've put together a free course called BPM Roadmap, Your Path to a Process-Driven Organization. The course walks you through exactly this, how to take the framework and actually apply it in your own organization. There's a workbook to hold your next steps. It's free. Just go to newprocesslab.com/roadmap. The link is also in the show notes, and it's the best place I know to go from listening to building a process-driven organization. That's it. That's where New Process stands today. That's the state of New Process 2026. So, for many years, process management has been about improving work. I believe the next chapter is about improving the experience of work, helping people understand it, helping them shape it, helping them improving it together. That's the journey New Process is on. And I genuinely love you to be part of it. So, thank you for spending this time with me. Until next time, live your process journey purposeful every single day.
You've been listening to the New Process Podcast. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next episode for more tools, methods, and best practices to rethink your process and push it to the next level. Thank you for listening.
Today, not one more thing. Just a reminder to get from listening to building a process-driven organization. Just go to newprocesslab.com/roadmap and get started now. So again, just go to newprocesslab.com/roadmap. Thank you very much for listening. Bye bye und auf Wiedersehen.